Hey guys, welcome back. So now we're jumping back into Venom and continuing our talks on this phenomenal story, which at this point gives us the introduction to Eddie Brock as the human symbiote, and it shows us some pretty crazy new tricks that Eddie's learned after spending a little time in the Unbeyond. And with that said, let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch your spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so at this point, we pick back up from Eddie's trip to the Unbeyond, where like we'd seen in issue 18, Eddie had a very insightful conversation with the eventuality that not only helped him come to terms with what he must do in order to stop what is essentially himself, but it also gave Eddie a bit of insight as far as his capability now that he separated himself from the cycle of transforming into Meridius. But as we pick up here, we begin in a laboratory that belongs to the Absent Throne, which like we'd seen back in Venom issue 3, the Absent Throne is a secret organization which has been connected to numerous events over the years, acting as an interventional entity, manipulating occurrences throughout time, with all these strings being pulled by Meridius. But it's here where we take a look at one of their labs, where we find a couple scientists running tests on a pile of bones that is actually the remains of Eddie Brock, which were collected after his physical body was destroyed in issue 1. But at this point, with the Absent Throne running multiple tests on this pile of bones, time after time, they find nothing. And this is with using technology that belongs decades in the future. But after analyzing these remains numerous times, as ordered by Meridius, one of these guys is just like, look, we found nothing. There's no symbiote material attached to these bones, and all they have here is some very average, yet charred, rotting scraps of human DNA. But then suddenly, one of the eyes starts glowing with the King in Black symbol, and right after, there's just an explosion of organs, blood, tissue, reconstructing the body of Eddie Brock. And before he's even fully formed, he knocks one of these scientists out, as the other one, in a panic, locks the door with just himself and Eddie in there, while telling Eddie that there's no way that this door can be opened, it's not humanly possible. But as this continues, I can't help but to think that all of the Terminator analogies from before are all just doubling down right now. But with this guy telling Eddie that it's not humanly possible for someone to get through this door, Eddie just tells the guy that he believes him, as he then just goes on to tear this door to pieces with his bare hands. And as Eddie makes his way to exit, he tells this guy that he's restored himself to operate at peak physical strength, because you'd be surprised at what a human symbiote can do. Which right there just blows this guy's mind, because when he took this job, nobody said anything about human symbiotes. But then from here, as Eddie continues to make his way through the corridors of this facility, in his birthday suit, he hears the alarms going crazy, but also he hears soldiers approaching, saying that this specific alarm means that whatever is happening right now, it's not something that was predicted by Meridius, and their instructions are to shoot and kill whoever or whatever they see on sight. So for Eddie, with him hearing this and not knowing exactly what Meridius has equipped these guys with, he then switches to stealth mode for the rest of his escape, to where next we find that the roads are closed off since Eddie's breakout at the lab. And as a result, it's this dude on the bike who gets stopped from trying to take the highway into town. But as the officer's giving this kid a hard time, he reaches for his gun, and we see these glowing red eyes in the bushes, to where then suddenly this officer's just snatched up by what we soon come to find out was Eddie's intestine. Because once again, it's a human symbiote we're dealing with here. But after saving this kid, Eddie tells him that he needs his bike, his clothes, but he can keep his drawers because that's nasty. But this kid then responds by asking Eddie if he's a Terminator. And Eddie just responds like, okay, yeah, sure, if it speeds this up, I'm a Terminator. And you guys already know for me, when I saw that, I was kind of like, man, I've been saying this for the past 18 videos. But from here, Eddie sees that the kid has a bag full of paint. So he asks the kid to pull out the white spray paint and do a little favor for him. And just after that, we see Eddie riding off with the jacket and his logo on the back, which right away lets us know that that kid, he may be stranded on the highway, but he's got talent. But as we see Eddie make his way into Baywater, which is where he's heading for the person that he's looking for, on the Welcome to Baywater sign, it reads, "Keep moving. This means you." And rather quickly upon entry, Eddie's harassed by a couple of cops, with one of them kind of looking like Bryan Cranston. But these officers, they tell Eddie that tourists like himself aren't welcome here. So he can either take a polite hint and turn around, or they can do this the hard way. But with Eddie going on to tell this guy that he's coming to Baywater because he has business here, one of these cops just goes across Eddie's head with a nightstick, busting Eddie's face open, to where then just seconds after, Eddie consciously reconstructs the bone and the flesh to restore himself, which shows us right away that this new human symbiote territory isn't like your conventional advanced healing factor, with Eddie having to consciously put himself back together, which is something that may advance the longer that he gets used to it. But after putting himself back together, he then kicks this cop through the windshield of his own truck, and with his partner opening fire in a panic just after, Eddie dismantles his gun and tells the second officer that he knows someone put them up to this. So he tells the officer to send a message to tell them that these officers couldn't stop Eddie, and whoever's on the other end, neither can they. But if they all step aside out of his way, then Eddie will solve their problem. And after this, Eddie then goes to meet the guy who claims to be the man who's running this town, and that's a guy by the name of Len Drexler. And if you guys remember, way back in issue 7, Len brought his hellhounds to Jake's bar after his men were attacked by Dylan in the Venom Symbiote. And at the time, Len came to Jake's bar because he wanted to make an example out of Jake and the Renegades, because he didn't know exactly who to pin this whole thing on. And it was at that time when Len agreed to a fist fight with Jake wanting to keep the guns out of it to avoid either of them losing their men. But with Len not being able to knock out Jake, he just grabbed the gun and shot him, to where right after his hellhounds shot down the rest of Jake's renegades and burned down his bar. And at the time, with us seeing how Jake had taken in Dylan for a little while and practically laid down his life to protect the kid, I'm still waiting to see if there's a reveal at some point for who Jake actually was. But at this point, this is pretty much how Len Drexler took over the streets of Baywater. But shortly after, with the Life Foundation locking this place down, with all these news headlines saying that they're looking for the symbiote with footage of Dylan going crazy. But as it turns out, the truth is the absent throne has got this place in a chokehold. So for Len, he believes that he just made some deal to help out the Life Foundation, and not so much out of the goodness of his heart, but more so like he's the boss around here and they had to go through him. So he tells his goons to kill Eddie and just feed him to the rats. But as it turns out for Eddie, he sees right through this whole thing. And again, he's a human symbiote, so handling these guys is no problem. Because again, he's reconstructed himself to have peak physical strength, so he takes down a few of these guys rather quickly. But with doing so, Eddie then goes on to tell Len that he knows that Len Drexler is not the man in charge, because Eddie could smell the man in charge from the next state over. So at this point, Joey, who's one of Len's men, he gets a bit nervous. So he tells Len, maybe we should let this guy go inside the bar and take care of that monster. But before he gets the name out, Len shuts him up and he reminds Joey that nobody's supposed to say that person's name. And at this point, Joey's kind of like, come on, man, the dude ate Mickey. He ate him. So Len tells Joey, yeah, you keep talking, you gonna be next. So at this point, Eddie's like, okay, yeah, I get it. You guys have this symbiotic relationship with this monster. You play nice, you feed it the not so loyal guys, and you tell everybody else you're in control. And while looking at Len, he tells him that he does all of this even though he's the one who's really on a leash. So of course, with hearing these choice words, Len gets offended. So he goes to shoot Eddie, but not before catching a butterfly knife right in the middle of his hand. And I mean, I don't know if that's considered catching the knife, but I mean, it's close enough. But from here, Lenny then does what we've seen him do before when things aren't going well for him, as he calls out for one of his hellhounds, screaming, somebody shoot this guy. But this time around, we find that nobody shoots, and Len tells Eddie that he's just like that monster inside the bar, and he knows that Eddie came here to chase down one of his own, because the both of them are the same. They're both monsters. But before we know it, Len is just then tossed through the window, as Eddie then casually makes his way through the door. And as Eddie makes his way inside, he then begins to talk to the real boss inside this bar. And he tells him, man, you won't believe what I went through to get here. I had to grow my body back, drive all the way down the coast, deal with the biker trash you've been lording over. Anyway, I'm here now, all warmed up and ready for a real fight. How about you? And just after this, we then see that Eddie is talking to Bedlam, as he tells Eddie that he's ready when he is. But even with this ending here, I'm curious to see if we're gonna see a change in Bedlam going forward, since both him and Eddie were separated in limbo, because I'm pretty sure Bedlam's gonna be a lot worse than what we'd seen in Dark Web. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/Dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.